one knows that yet, but they soon will. So Cynthia McKinney is a very special woman for many reasons. She served 6 years in the U.S. House of Representatives and lives to tell the tale, which I want to hear a little more about. She has registered as a Green in the state of California, and she is ready to lead our country and is gonna you're excited about that too. And she represents the values of Greens. She has spent her whole career fighting for nonviolence, sustainability, justice, and grassroots democracy. It's her second public appearance. And so what we will do is Cynthia's going to talk briefly and then we'll take questions. So I'm so thrilled to welcome Cynthia to Portland.
About the best introduction I could ever get. Young Calliope, thank you very much. I'm going to take you with me everywhere I go. This will be a traveling a road show, and you know, it's going to be wonderful. What Marty told you is, yeah, I haven't made any official announcements yet, but we have filed our official papers with the Federal Election Commission. The name of the committee is the Power to the People Committee. And we thought we would do that because what we're seeing, at least to our south, from our brothers and sisters in the south, are people revolutions. And I recall when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. made his final speech on the night of April 3rd, 1968. He recounted how he was so happy to be living at that particular moment in the 20th century because people all over the world were saying we want to be free. And so I can say that now it's wonderful for us to be living at the dawn of the 21st century, where once again people are saying we want to be free, and we've seen that from Venezuela and Brazil. We've seen it in Chile and Argentina. We've seen it in Bolivia and Ecuador. We've seen it just recently in Nicaragua, but we've also seen it in India. We saw it in Spain after the 3/11 tragedy. We saw it in Rome when the Coalition of the Willing under Berlusconi became the Coalition of the Crumbling under Romano Prodi. And so people are beginning to understand that there really is power in unity, power in vision, power in a sense of mission. And so as I travel around the country, I'm kind of disappointed because there are a lot of Americans who believe that we are powerless. There are a lot of Americans who are feeling this sense of hopelessness. And we don't have to be hopeless. We don't have to feel powerless. And then I'm traveling with a friend of mine from Haiti, and we can only just imagine what it was like to have your duly elected president stolen from you 2 times. The last time, put on a plane, taken to destination unknown, told you can't come back to Haiti. And yet, the Haitian people, in the face of such a travesty that was perpetrated on them by our own government, by this administration, decided that they were still going to exercise their people power. And they believed in themselves, they believed in the power of the vote, the power of the ballot. And so even in the face of an attempt to steal the election with 86,000 blank ballots that they were going to stuff in the ballot box against René Préval, who was a friend of Jean-Bertrand Aristide, the Haitian people took to the streets and they demanded that their votes be counted. They demanded that their voice be counted. They demanded that there be election integrity. And as a result, René Préval is the leader of Haiti today because the Haitian people said, we will have it no other way. And so now, in 2000, we know what happened. An election was stolen from us. And there was these rich and very powerful people who felt that they could manipulate the election by naming Florida the battleground state, the home of the president's brother, where he was a governor. And they imported lists of people that they said were not going to be able to vote in Florida from other states that were controlled by other Republican governors. Ohio, New Jersey, there was Chrissy Todd Whitman, Ohio was Voinovich, and even Texas, where George W. Bush was the governor. That act of importing those lists and then banning from the ballot box people who had a right to vote, who had committed no crime, who certainly had not committed felonies, that act in and of itself was also a violation of the law. No one has yet to pay for the violation of the right to vote of people in Florida, and of course now the world has had to pay because no one dared to stand up for the rights of those people who were dispossessed of their right to vote. They were disfranchised in the most cynical and mean-spirited way. And not only do we now pay, but the international community now pays. We have seen the kind of erosion of our civil liberties that probably no one ever experienced. People who came to this country because they believed in America. They believed in our freedoms. They understood that the beacon of hope that we proclaimed ourselves to be, now they are targeted by the Patriot Act, the Secret Evidence Act, the Military Tribunals Act, and with the prospective passage of the Homegrown Terrorism Prevention Act, all of us will be targeted. We could say that because we didn't take care of our business in 2000, we didn't take care of our business in 2004, we better take care of our business in 2008. We must not give up, or as my former colleague John Lewis used to always say, we can't give up, we can't give out, and we can't give in. I shudder to think at what our country will become. Young Calliope deserves a future. This young girl sitting in the audience, yes, you, my sweet, you deserve a future. And America, as I have crossed this country, yes, I've driven from Georgia to Maine 2 times. And now I just came from Seattle and driving to Portland and then going to Corvallis and then going back to Georgia and then heading north to Chicago and all of this traveling. One of the things that I am learning more than anything else is that we have such a large country. We have it's a beautiful country, and it's full of beautiful people, and it's a wealthy country. And we can do better than we are doing. We must do better. The greatest generation didn't make the sacrifices that they made for what is happening in our country today. I know that my mother and my father marched with Dr. King, and they didn't march and make those sacrifices for the America that we have today. The people who have chosen to come and live in our country, they chose a different America, not the America that's being made today. It's the character of our country, it's the soul of our country that's at stake, and I know you also believe as I do and share the values that I have, because you wouldn't be here otherwise. So thank you very much for being here. I want to thank Teresa King. Where did you go, Teresa? For hosting us this evening. And if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to try and answer them for you.
Thank you, everyone. I think we had a question starts over here, first hand.
Okay, Cynthia, I appreciate you being here. God bless you for being here. I'm a Vietnam veteran. I know what happened in Vietnam. I know what this government did. We committed nonstop atrocities in Vietnam and Cambodia and Laos. Tell me, what is it like to be around what is it like to be around the George Bushes and the Cheneys and the other people in our government, Condoleezza Rice, and all of the other people? What is it like to be next to them? And what kind of energy do you get from these people? Can you tell us a little bit about what it's like to be around these people?
Well, you know, I try to give my energy to them. I can't absorb that stuff that they give. I've never seen anything like it, really. You know, I'm from Georgia. I'm from the South. Georgia is all I know. I have campaigned, my very first congressional campaign back in 1992 was the first time that an African American had run for Congress in the particular areas in my state that comprised what I call the old 11th district. And we had a gentleman come down from Time and Newsweek, and he was actually shocked that I could go into a restaurant and try and reach out to all of the people who were there at the restaurant, and people would not shake my hand. They were shocked that in some of the local towns that I tried to campaign in, people would tell me, "You better get out of town before dark." They were surprised that America still exists. But I can tell you, it does still exist. You guys, you don't know how good you have it here in Portland, because you try coming into some of the areas that I have walked in. And we tried to make things better when I represented that area. Now, what I experienced in the heartland of Georgia, a place full of people that I truly love and love the experience of representing them, is nothing like these people who knowingly make decisions that hurt other people. How in the world can Condoleezza Rice, who was born in Birmingham, Alabama, understands the struggle more than anybody else, choose the side that she has chosen? That's why it was very important for me to include her in the articles of impeachment. We had to do that. It's time out for letting people slide. You can't let folks slide when they choose to side with the bad guys. Right. And she made a knowing choice. Colin Powell, you know, he got out, he left, but unfortunately he chose the bad side. And as an African American, it's important for me to call names and to say it as it is. And we can't give folks a pass just because they are walking in a place that we have never walked in before. We can't do that, because when they assume those positions and walk in those places where we have never had the opportunity to walk before, they carry a little bit of the civil rights movement with them. They carry a little bit of the American dream with them. They carry a little bit of what it was that murdered Dr. Martin Luther King with them. And they betray that.
That's right.
They betray that. So, you know, it was good for me to match wits with Colin Powell as I served on the International Relations Committee. It was wonderful for me to match wits with Donald Rumsfeld as I served on the House Armed Services Committee, because they were not prepared to answer the kinds of questions that I asked, which is the conversations that probably many of you have around the dinner table. And it's not just the first question. You got to be well researched so you can ask the second, third, and fourth questions that they really don't want to answer.
How about,
Yeah,
Yeah.
In Olympia, the Port of Olympia just recently, there was protesters trying to stop our equipment coming back from Iraq. They don't want the Port of Olympia to be used as a military site. The police brutalized them. Would you comment on anything about a police state in America today? What is your thoughts?
Oh, that's very interesting that you asked that, because I was recently hosted by the Austrian Greens, and in an interview that I did, the headline, I don't know German, but the headline in English was police state. At that part I understood. And, I said, oh my goodness, did I really mean to say that, But honestly, if you've got Blackwater troops patrolling your streets, then what are you? If you can't traverse the city of Washington, D.C. freely, then what is going on? If there's military checkpoints or police checkpoints in the city of New Orleans and Washington, D.C., then what is it that's going on? The Gulf Coast, after Hurricanes Katrina and Rita, seems to me has been turned into a civil liberties free zone. And the idea of certain city councils entertaining ordinances that would create free speech zones. The entire United States is supposed to be a free speech zone. So the threat to our civil liberties is real. The ability of the United States government to pick certain people and then say, well, we want to know what your medical records are. We want to know what your bank records are. We want to know what books you're reading. We want to know what websites you're visiting. There was a time, I'm a student of the counterintelligence program, and COINTELPRO is sort of like my thing. Well, Senator Frank Church said that those were illegal and un-American activities. Well, they're not quite illegal today, but I think they're still un-American. And so we've really got the opening session of the Democratic majority in Congress should have entertained several bills. Among them, repeal of the Military Tribunals Act, repeal of the Patriot Act, repeal of Patriot 2, repeal of secret evidence. That's what the Democratic majority in the Congress should have done. But they didn't do that. Repeal of the Bush tax cuts. Repeal. We could go on and on of the things that should have been done that have not yet been done. We hope that they will be done before we have to vote on the 110th Congress, the 111th Congress.
thank you. Cynthia, if you could repeat the questions, if you could.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
The lady in pink in the back.
Thank you. Well, tailing off of that, it does appear that in reality, the Democrats in Congress aren't understanding any of this. They just voted, they're mocking Dennis Kucinich's impeachment bill, and they just voted in free trade agreement with Peru. So if they can't understand the problem, how are we going to get them to understand the problem, given that we've been trying to get them to understand the problem since at least 2000, if not earlier?
Well, if your elected representatives don't understand your problems, then you need to change your elected representatives. Maybe you need to become the representative. And that's not just a, sort of a spiffy answer. I really believe that. And the first time I went up to Kennebunkport, Maine, Well, you know, I did want to present a special greeting to our president, but I also endorsed Cindy Sheehan in her campaign in San Francisco. And so, you know, what Cindy is doing is very important because she's showing us that average ordinary folks can make huge differences, huge impacts on public opinion. And so, you know, you can do that too. And we all can do that. I think that's where the beginning of that people power comes from. I mean, you know, what about Evo Morales in Bolivia? I mean, you know, these are just regular, ordinary people who were struggling for justice and struggling with a sense of mission. And now he's, look, the president of a country. Nelson Mandela, I mean, look, he was on the terror list. In fact, they just gave him a waiver so he could come over here. He's still on a terror list. But he became, you know, the president of a country. So we can learn from what people in other countries are doing. We should, and that should also give us confidence to do it ourselves.
The fellow in the beige behind.
Hi, let me ask you a question, a couple questions. When you were driving around the country, did you buy any gasoline from the biggest industry in the country, ExxonMobil?
Not that I know of.
Okay, here's a big question though. About 2/3 of our tax money, if you look at it realistically, goes to the military complex, the Lockheeds, Martins, the Northrop Grummings, Raytheons, General Dynamic, SAIC, Booz Allen Hamilton, who revolve these people from government to the military contractors, including our friend Condoleezza Rice. Will somebody call for the nationalization, public ownership of these defense contractors and get them under control simultaneously? Let's start closing the empire, 800 plus foreign bases. We need to shut those down, grab a hold of the Northrops and Lockheeds, and start spreading that money into healthcare. We have given up so much, so we don't have healthcare, we don't have a housing program.
Right.
But we have thousands of thermal nukes, laser-guided weapons, direct energy weapons, biological and chemical. There's at least 60 aerosol spraying programs around the country. Black ops have gone way out of control. Public needs to wake up yesterday. You know, I mean, the main thing I have learned about Americans, Cynthia, is they know absolutely nothing about America. They don't know about Northrop, Lockheed, SAIC. But they make so many decisions. They're not just military contractors. They're in the finance, surveillance, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
That's kind of a rant, but also a statement.
And I agree with your statement. It is a rant, but I mean, you know, we all need to be ranting.
Well, we do that.
The lady in the back with the blonde hair. Yes.
So you had mentioned Kenny Bunkport for a second, and so there was a document, a supposed document that was floating around the internet last summer called the Kenny Bunkport Warning.
Oh.
And so, which I believe was signed by Webster Tarpley and yourself, and maybe Dennis Kucinich, I think, was on that list. And I think it spoke to the possibility of there being some kind of contrived event or false flag event to instigate some kind of attack on Iran, I believe in September. And so I was wondering if you could speak to the authenticity of that, and also about those ideas of possibilities of different events happening that could be used as a catalyst for an attack on Iran in the near future.
Yeah, with specific reference to the Kenny Bunkport warning, I think there was some language there that should not have been there that sort of compromised the overall message that was intended. Having said that, you know, we have some documents, Operation Northwoods documents, and so Operation Northwoods, had it been carried out, would have been a false flag operation. And so to suggest that perhaps false flag operations don't exist is incorrect, because false flag operations do exist. As to whether or not there will be a false flag operation directed against Iran, I can't say that. I don't have a crystal ball. But I think we ought to pay very close attention to what is happening now, the machinations that sort of go on with our government, with this administration, with other governments, and just sort of have our antenna up, because these things can happen. They can happen very quickly, and before you know it, we are engulfed in something, and it really was a false flag operation. We shouldn't fall prey to that.
The lady in the pink turtleneck, or peach. And please start with your, I want to make sure everyone hears the question, so please start out with the question. Thanks.
A representative from Massachusetts, I believe, told his constituents that one of the reasons, or the main reason, that impeachment cannot be considered is because essentially the Bush administration has them all over a barrel in that they could trigger such a false flag attack and go right into war with Iran. And so it's essentially a high-stakes game of chicken. And that, to me, is the only thing I can think of as a reason not to impeach these people that have, I mean, how many more impeachable offenses need to happen before they're impeachable? So could you address that, do you think that the Democratic leadership can do that, can impose such a fear like that over the constituents or the representatives that they would actually abdicate their constitutional duty?
Well, I'm not afraid of them. If they have some information that the American people need to know, they ought to tell the American people, and they ought to tell the whole truth. And if there's something that has been threatened, and these people are keeping it to themselves and leaking it here and leaking it there, that's not the way responsible leadership is supposed to act.
I see you in the 911 Truth Alliance t-shirt.
Is my hand not being seen, or?
I see everyone's hands, and everyone's going to
It's
have.
gone up every time, and I've been missed completely.
I'm doing it randomly, so I apologize. You can be next, sir. Thanks for your patience. I see it. We have lots of hands up. Everyone will have a chance. We have at least 20 minutes left.
You just about segued into 9/11 when you started talking about false flag. And I guess a number of us are here tonight to thank you for standing up in the face of all the denial. In fact, we basically wanted to present you a thank you card for your courage.
No anthrax in there, by the way.
For your
that's
courage,
wonderful.
for standing up and strongly suggesting that it needed a new investigation.
Yes.
And that it was
Yes.
therefore an inside job. Thank you. Would you speak?
Yes. Thank you very much. What's your name?
Barry.
Barry.
Ball.
Okay, thank you, Barry.
We have a number of thank yous inside that card.
911 Hero. That's wonderful. I don't know why I'm speechless, okay? Can I be speechless sometime?
Time's up.
Can't even.
I got into so much trouble. I was just asking questions. And, I didn't really ask any questions that probably anybody in this room didn't ask. It's just that I asked them out loud. And folk weren't ready for that. And I don't really understand a whole lot of stuff all I can say is we still don't know the truth about what happened on that particular day. We don't know how it came to be that we've invested trillions of dollars in intelligence and military infrastructure, and it failed 4 times in one day.
I think you know.
Well,
Inside job.
so I join with the other people who have called for an international investigation of highly esteemed people, because the whole world has been put into turmoil as a result of the events of that one day. The whole world was lied to. And you know, we can read those articles like talking about the president, Aznar, the conversation that Aznar had with Bush when they were planning all of this. And, you know, they had other countries lying to their people. They lied to us. We all know. And so, you know, we just don't give up. But anyway, I'm really touched, and I thank you very much for this card, because it means a lot to me.
Sarah, would you like to ask a question?
It's a two-part question. One is Nancy Pelosi that great a ventriloquist that she can put words in John Conyers' mouth? Because supposedly John Conyers, when he received Kucinich's bill for impeachment of Cheney, said, "We don't have time for this," supposedly. And the second part is, how soon can we instigate war crimes? I don't know if you're a lawyer or not, but I've been asking every lawyer I know, can I, as a private citizen, instigate them? Do we need to bring some people over from Iraq? Probably easy to do because they don't live there anymore. And I'm quite serious, because basically, if they're not going to deal with impeachment, and I don't believe Mr. Conyers doesn't have time, I believe somebody pressures him, then let's go directly to the heart of the matter, which is war crimes. These people are the largest war criminals since the Nazis. And so how do we get to The Hague?
First of all, you know, it's disappointing to me to watch the dance that my former colleagues dance as they try and answer the question, how come impeachment is off the table? It's interesting to watch John Conyers, as his own wife, as a member of the Detroit City Council, votes to support impeachment. And, you know, she's, you know, having that conversation with her husband. So we know that there is duplicity afoot. And, you know, the bottom line is that the power is there to initiate the proceedings. The political will does not exist. And so then, if the political will doesn't exist in the 110th Congress, is it the 110th
Right.
now? Then it needs to be made to exist in the 111th. The other question on war crimes, we should draw inspiration from what one prosecutor and one very brave judge in Spain were willing to do with respect to Pinochet and torture, because they showed us that accountability is not a 4-letter word. Accountability actually is in the dictionary. Now, I'm involved in some international litigation around this whole issue of war crimes. I'm involved with the Brussels Tribunal, which is about Iraq. I'm involved with the Malaysia Peace Tribunal, which has as its goal the prosecution of any national leader who is responsible for violations of international law. I am also involved in some litigation in Spain with respect to war crimes, crimes against humanity that have taken place on the African continent. And we are actually engaged in the panel of Judge Garzón, who was the one who oversaw and approved of the Pinochet prosecution. So we're very hopeful about that particular litigation. I'm also involved in the Hurricanes Katrina and Rita International Tribunal, because it's clear that we just are not going to be able to get justice here in the United States. And so you're absolutely right that, that we have to seek justice where we can. And so the international arena, there are international laws. The United States has responsibilities to uphold those laws. And there are some of us who are ready to make sure that that happens.
Thanks for your patience.
No,
Jim?
Sorry.
Congresswoman McKinney, thank you for coming.
Thanks, I'm Cynthia.
I have a very special affinity for your candidacy, in part because I also spent some time at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy.
Oh my goodness.
And I wanted to know what you wrote your thesis there on and what you're writing your dissertation on now, and what do you think of green foreign policy should be?
Ooh. Okay, first of all, on matters green, I think, you know, like, maybe I had green values and I didn't know that I had green values. And so then once I knew that I had green values and I began to interact with members of the Green Party, I wasn't a member of the Green Party. So now I have green values and I'm a member of the Green Party, and those values, first and foremost, demand respect for other human beings, and they demand respect for the planet that gives us life. So the foreign policy would have to reflect those sort of two supreme values. Now, my dissertation, Lord, how many dissertations have I written? I wrote half of a dissertation at the Fletcher School. And then my professors decided that they needed to add more countries to the countries that I was already writing about. And, you know, then all of a sudden Congress just looked real appealing. So I have this half a dissertation sitting out there from the Fletcher School. In the meantime, though, I've been accepted 2 times now at the University of California at Berkeley. So I'm really looking forward to actually matriculating at Berkeley. And so now, while all of my academic career has been involved in international relations, I am very interested, and I have become enamored with the subject of the counterintelligence program. So I will be in the African American Studies Department at the University of California at Berkeley, and I will basically be investigating, hopefully, if these professors will accept what I want to do. But I'd like to look at assassination as a state tool of policy. And the fact of the matter is that our country has been engaged in assassination, and they've not made a secret of it. In fact, there are executive orders to that effect. And we can start with this whole notion of regime change that rolls off some people's lips now, starting with respect to Saddam Hussein. But we know that regime change started a long time ago. And it wasn't just in the application of our foreign policy, it was also in our domestic policy. So for example, Fred Hampton was murdered in his bed while he slept by law enforcement, and we find out later that the FBI had targeted him as a part of the counterintelligence program. And there are dozens of other people who were murdered as a result of the COINTELPRO program. These people, their families have not received justice. Their families, some of them to this day, don't even know what happened to them, how it happened, why it happened. And so as a result of me looking at the counterintelligence program, I found it very interesting that the whole Black Panther Party was disrupted by this East Coast, West Coast kind of rivalry that was stoked by our own FBI. If you go to on the internet, these papers have been put on the internet by an enterprising young man by the name of Paul Wolf. Check it out, read those papers, and if there's students in here, write about that program, and so you will understand what has happened in the past, so we can understand what is happening today and what might happen tomorrow. And so that's why not only was I compelled to drop in legislation exposing to the public all of the papers about the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but also interested in following the so-called East Coast, West Coast schism that took place in hip-hop. And so I also dropped in legislation to expose to public view the papers pertaining to the murder of Tupac, which it exists today as an as yet unsolved murder. So, you know, that's what I really I like to write about that, because it's so important when we talk about false flag operations. We have to understand what our government is capable of doing, and that's why Operation Northwoods is so important. Now, see, as an African American, I know what it's like, because it was, you know, MK Ultra, and I became friends with the son of Paul Robeson, because Paul Robeson, the strong, proud actor that he was victimized by the MK Ultra program. And so then, of course, we go through and we look at the PNAC documents, Rebuilding America's Defenses, where they write we must have genotypically specific biological weapons because they can become a politically useful tool. Well, as an African American, to me, that's the Tuskegee experiment, where for 40 years, black men went to the doctor thinking that they were being treated and they were being studied like guinea pigs. That's what our government has done to us. So now, if they have done that to us, and they were capable of doing that, and they were proud enough about it to write it down, then certainly we need to understand what is capable of happening today. We must understand.
I think we have time for 3 more questions, so.
Is there a title for this Paul Wolf paper?
If you put COINTELPRO in your search engine, you'll get many citations, and then if you look down to Paul Wolf, you'll see the actual scans of the documents.
The lady in the back, please. Speak up, please.
I came in late. Cynthia, I want to return to Roger's question. I heard your statement that there's not the political will. What I would like to know is there international treaty law that we can, as the will of the people, bring our own people or any of these people to the forum, in a public forum, for crimes against humanity?
Okay, let's see. Can individual people... Actually, I think the answer is yes, but you might have to do that in international courts.
Okay, so, all right.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm curious what you can tell us about the persistent contrails or the chemtrail programs that were brought up by Dennis Kucinich in a bill to stop them, and there's all kinds of conjecture and mystery about and some of us are working to.
I just need to add, though, that there is, I'm not an international lawyer, I'm not even a U.S. lawyer, but there is something called sovereign immunity, and so while people are in office, that's why it was after Pinochet left office that he was subject to this criminal prosecution. And so either you go up to a certain level and let it rest there, or you wait until they leave office. So, you know, that's why Donald Rumsfeld had to be escorted, whisked out of France, because he was afraid that he was going to be served with a warrant.
Do you want to repeat your question?
Oh,
Yeah. Do you want to
chemtrails.
Yeah.
Yeah, what can you tell us about those? There's all sorts of conjecture, there's some things we do know, that weather modification, experimentation, and military uses, things like that, but what do you know about them?
I don't know very much about chemtrails, and, you know, that's something that I'm going to have to get more information on. Well, you know, we all kind of see what's going on up in the sky. And I mean, chemtrails may be one thing, but remember when we protested, it was the largest protest in Washington, D.C. against the war, and they sprayed the protesters. I was among them. They sprayed the protesters with some substance unknown. So you know, it's up there, but they're also there. We don't know what else is going on, and that's why people are so skeptical about the spraying programs that go on in cities like, you know, New York City and other places. So I have to learn more about chemtrails. I understand that there's a lot of conjecture about what that might be. At the same time, we have a lot of other things that we need to be worried about, including you know, this sort of nanotechnology now, where they've got these little drone bugs that we don't know what they might be able to do with us, to us.
Hutchinson is in the process of pushing through weather modification right now.
Excuse me?
Billy Hutchinson.
Well, I mean, you know, those experiments and research has been going on for a very long time, since the days of the Soviet Union. Pushing it through how?
Opposite of what Dennis Kucinich brought a while back was to make sure we investigate it before we allow it in our skies. Now they're actually making it official that we can allow weather modification. So legislation.
Yeah, well, I mean, they were doing it anyway.
We're going to have one more question and then close up, and there'll be time for, you know, mingling after. A little time for mingling after. It's the fellow in the back. With one finger. Yes, black shirt.
Hi. Actually, two questions. One, are they going to allow you to pursue your doctorate from the Oval Office?
You're absolutely right. There's nothing that's going to stop me. My mother is so disappointed, let me tell you, because, you know, because they have to pay for me being a student, right? Well, actually, I shouldn't say that they don't, but they don't have to, but they feel a sense of responsibility because they're good parents, you know. But I have had the longest education probably of anybody in this country, and I'm still a student.
And actually, a serious question. You mentioned in your opening remarks the reaction in Haiti to election fraud. And then you've mentioned that justice is not to be had in this country, and that it's inevitable that we're going to have to go overseas to get these criminals somehow, some way. What is it about the American character, in your opinion, that allows two elections to be stolen, that doesn't get millions of people in the streets, preventing this fool from even approaching his alleged house? You know, what is it about Americans, in variance with most of the rest of the world, seemingly at the moment, that allows this stuff to go on?
You know, I can't answer that question for you because I'm extremely outraged. And I've been outraged for a very long time. In fact, I've been outraged since I read a book written by, I can't remember his name, former CIA agent who was who was the station chief. John Stockwell, who was the station chief. Who said that? Yes, who was the station chief in Angola. And what really infuriated me was the use of black pride, and yet the lack of information on the part of many black people who were tricked into going to Africa and fighting on the wrong side against the MPLA, against SWAPO, against Frelimo, and fighting for actually holding Roberto in the situation of Angola, was the brother-in-law of Mobutu. And that was a cynical trick that was played on black people in the United States by Henry Kissinger. And from that very moment, it was reading that book. Now, I never decided that, thought I would be in Congress or anything like that. But it was reading that book that made me want, once I got elected to Congress, to serve on the International Relations Committee so I could do something about a horrible U.S. policy, foreign policy. So, now I forgot what the question was. Sound like Rumsfeld now.
Why are we not in the streets?
Oh, yes. You know what? In fact, there was a gentleman, where were we?
New York.
New York, and it was an African guy? Peruvian. Oh, yes. It was a Peruvian hip-hopper. And the young people probably know who that was. Y'all know who it was? Say it, say it. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. That's right. And he said that Americans must be the only people on the planet who would sit for 17 hours on a JetBlue plane on the runway. Maybe that tells us something.
Do you have any closing remarks for everyone?
Closing remarks is like,
Please
well,
come back.
Thank you very much.
We'll have a bigger crowd for you next.
I can't imagine a bigger crowd because
we
this
will.
is like huge.
No,
Thank you very
no,
much.
This is small for Portland.
Yes.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Well, this is huge for Georgia, okay? Thank you very much. There's so much love in this room. Y'all gonna bowl me over.